to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. First, I'd like to get approval of last month's meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. First thing is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be voted on a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda.
The consent agenda includes 2501 Barton Avenue. This is new construction addition. 2000 19th Avenue South, demolition of an outbuilding and existing addition. 927 Fatherland Street, an outbuilding. 2401 Fairfax, new construction of an outbuilding, a garage. 1416 Garland Avenue, a conversion to detached accessory dwelling unit. 1107 Shelby, this is an addition. 110 South 17th Street, an addition. And 1513 Paris, this is a detached accessory dwelling unit. Staff recommends approval of the items on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to staff about anything on the agenda? Okay, thanks. Open public hearing. Is anyone that would like this, any of these items taken off the consent agenda? Okay, close public hearing.
Move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, consent agenda is approved. Okay, first we have a council person who would like to speak on a case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm Berkeley Allen. I'm council member for the 18th district, and there are two properties in my district that neighbors have expressed concern on, and I would like to address those concerns. First is the proposed structure at 1818 Wildwood. I'd like to say I have tremendous respect for the architect, and I appreciate his innovative approach to putting a duplex on a small lot, but we're concerned that there's not a historic precedent for putting duplexes one behind the other, which is how this one is currently adopted. And I would hope that maybe through some discussion, either that could be reoriented to be side by side on the street, which is the historic precedent, or perhaps altered to be a detached auxiliary dwelling unit, or possibly just a single family home. So I would just ask that maybe part of the discussion be if there's a way to perhaps make that more there? Okay. To make that more consistent with the historic guidelines. Secondly, I'd like to speak about the property at 1910 Linden. I know the developers worked hard to incorporate a lot of historic features into this design, but again, I would request more discussion about the appropriateness of the materials in this particular application. It's a large four-square. He's proposed hardy plank. If I am remembering my neighborhood correctly, most of the four squares are brick and stone. So I would say, although there is lots of hardy plank being used for eaves and for setback parts of the structure, it's not typically the primary facade. So I would ask that there be a discussion about the materials. And also the staff had recommended that they go with the tradition foundation for the front porch as opposed to having an open front porch, and that the piers for that stop at the floor of the porch, and that the foundation height be reduced to 2 feet rather than anything higher than that at its lowest point, and also that they eliminate the second-story bay. I think all those recommendations by the staff are consistent with the historic guidelines. So I appreciate your taking the time to discuss those, and I would hope that you would give them your thoughtful consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the first item on new business is 204 South 11th Street.
Chairman, 204 South 11th Street has been removed at the owner's consent, so if it is all right, I will jump right into 1818 Wildwood.
Thank you.
The historic context for this duplex infill project in Belmont Hillsborough, it's one of the ones that the councilperson just mentioned, is an eclectic collection of post-war minimal traditional homes found in mainly the 1819 blocks of Wildwood. Typical features of these minimal traditional homes are one-story rectangular forms with side gabled roofs. None of them have porches. Staff found the proposed building to be inappropriate for the neighborhood in terms of scale, form, and orientation because there are no examples of duplexes being front to back or behind each other, but only fully side by side. The location and front and side setbacks are appropriate. However, the great depth of the building requires a reduction of the 20-foot setback in one portion. The proposed 27-foot tall two-story building is out of scale for the neighborhood that is mainly 20 to 23-foot tall buildings that are one-story homes. Few of the materials are known, however, those that were indicated, the roof and the foundation, are appropriate. Taking into account the historic context, the roof pitch is too steep. The majority of these post-war homes have a lower pitch than the 912 presented. The orientation of the front unit is appropriate. However, the orientation of the second unit is not, as it has to face the side of the lot rather than the front towards the street. In the past, the Commission has required that attached garages not only be at the basement level, but also in the appropriate location of an historic accessory structure. Side-loading basement garages have only been allowed when there's no option for a rear-loading garage. In this case, the project has two side-loading, two-bay basement garages, which are at least one of them being in an inappropriate, or both of them being in an appropriate location. The location of the HVAC and other utilities was not noted. Staff recommends disapproval, finding that the project does not meet the historic context of this portion of the Belmont Hillsborough neighborhood, specifically sections 2B1A, B, C, E, F, and I of the design guidelines. Additional information is required to assess sections 2B1, D, and H. And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
First, any questions to Robin? Thank you. Okay, with the applicant, and state your name and address.
You're sure this isn't supposed to be on the consent agenda? Manuel Zeitlin, architect. I live in the neighborhood at 1919 Linden and offices at 516 Hagen Street. I've got a few handouts if I can hand a couple things out. I'm going to here's a set of photographs. Here's some drawings. Could you switch back to the front slide? I get the front elevation. The front elevation, I guess. Yeah, that looks a lot better. I'm sorry it's going to take a little while to go through this, but it's a relatively small project, but there was so much in the staff report that I want to address and respond to. I know this is a hard type of a project because I think at the base of it is a neighborhood that doesn't want to see, two-family dwellings in a neighborhood. And as you know, zoning's, it's allowed by zoning, and what I've tried to do is work on how can we get a two-family dwelling that fits into the neighborhood appropriately, as small of a scale as possible. I asked for the second slide, the side elevation to be taken off because it looks so big, but the reason the house is so long is because we're more concerned about the front elevation on the street, and to get a very narrow house on the street frontage means it's longer front to back. I mean, we could go wider on the street and be less deep in length, but that was, you saw the pictures of the existing 1.5-story houses along the street, and this was a strong attempt to relate to the scale of those houses. One of the things I want to address, philosophically, is this idea that there's an appropriate arrangement for duplexes or two-family houses, and that is governed by historic regulations. There's not anything in the guidelines that talks about form following function. It talks about appearance on the street. It talks about relating to the context and the scale of houses around it, the architectural character, and I know a lot of people think of me as a modern architect probably, but I've got a real strong background in historic preservation. I studied it in college. I was on the Historical Commission in Franklin for 10 years. I taught a class in historical preservation, and I think this is worth discussing because I know it sort of came out of, I think, neighbors' objections in Lockland Springs, and I've seen it in Salem Town, where we're starting to see a lot of side-by-side duplexes, and it's almost they're almost taking over in terms of changing the appearance of streets from single-family appearing houses to side-by-side duplex appearing houses, and I don't think it's a good result that we're getting. And in terms of sort of thinking of this, my question is, what if zoning changed? We've all been to like restaurants in Philadelphia, New York, Chicago that are in old townhouses. What if the zoning changed and said, okay, now we're going to allow, I'm talking 10 years down the road and it's more dense and there's public transportation. We want to have people to be able to walk down the street to a restaurant in their neighborhood or to a retail store, and we allow restaurants and retail. Are you going to all of a sudden say, well, a restaurant on Wildwood's got to look like a restaurant on Belmont? A church on Wildwood's got to look like a church on Belmont? I think the underlying principle I'm trying to make the case for is that the majority of the buildings on on Wildwood are single-family houses, and no matter what the use is, it's not the idea of having a new design that says the two front entrances face Wildwood. It's the idea of having a house that looks like a house, and the idea that it's two different families, that there's nothing inherent in the guidelines or in sort of historic precedent or historic district precedent that says something has to look like what its use is. The scale on the street, I think, is much more important. So enough about that. Another thing in the staff report that I was concerned about, again, philosophically, is they're talking about relating to these 1940 houses along the street, and it said they disregarded the house across the street, which I think is one of the nicest street houses in the neighborhood, and was there 21 years before this house was built. The house that was there, this group of houses were built, and the staff saying, well, they shouldn't. They really don't think that house should be taken into consideration because it's a different time period, which I find real disturbing for a historical commission staff, saying we should ignore the historical houses and we should only pay the attention to the houses the developer came in and built as cheaply as possible with as inexpensive materials as possible that have now gained historical significance in their own right. I appreciate that they've gained that historical significance, but that doesn't mean that we ignore the houses that were there first. So those are a couple sort of big picture things. The pictures I handed out are, the first page is a group of houses on Hazelwood that I looked at, which is around the corner from these houses. And when this developer in the 40s built these houses, it's clear that they didn't pay any attention to this group of houses with steeper roofs and more character. And so we went and looked at those houses when I started the design of this house, and the sort of the steep gable, the steeper roofs are a response to those houses rather than the ones on Wildwood that ignored the historical precedent. We're basically talking about a 4-foot difference in the height of the ridge, and I felt like, again, that's okay because there's a 2-story house across the street, so this is smaller scale than that house. The other thing we did we didn't intend for there to be a 20-foot rear yard exception asked for. We just we missed it when I was doing the plans. The back of the lot is not square, so it's much bigger than 20 on one side. So on the plans I handed out, we basically flipped the house and readjusted the rear setback, so we've got a 20-foot rear setback. The other thing I did was on that plan we've inset the addition, what I'm considering the addition, 2 feet on both sides, the same as you would a single-family house. And I guess that's really the basis for the case I'm making, is that I'm asking you to view this as if it were a single-family house that were added onto. There are lots of examples of single-family houses throughout Hillsborough Village and on the street that have been added onto. So using those principles, stepping in 2 feet and then going back so we're not very visible on the street. The other thing I did on the side elevation of that plan I just handed you out was made more of a gable side on the front gable, so it's again more representative of the sides of the single-family houses on the street. I guess a couple other just points. I could keep going, but I think it's, I know there's some concern about the size of the house on the street. The house next door that was approved by the commission that we designed as an addition to an existing house has actually a bigger footprint than this house does. So, as an architect, where do we know, what the limits are? If we're looking at a house that was approved, it was a front-to-back duplex that was approved. Yes, it was an addition to an existing house. But it just seems like that you could use the same precedent that this design is based on the idea of that it would look like an existing house in the front that's been added onto. Issues like the garages, I'm concerned, again, being in the neighborhood, that I don't want a lot of cars on the street, so the idea was trying to accommodate the cars for these residences on site. You could easily go behind the houses. That just means tearing down more trees, so we haven't done that. And I would be surprised if the neighbors had an objection to the side garages, again, as a way to get cars out of the site and off the street. And I guess the only other point in terms of the staff's report, they said that most of the houses on the street are 6 and 12. That's not the case. They're all, and that's, again, the photographs, I think it's maybe the third sheet in there. That was me walking up the street with my dogs yesterday, and those are all minimum 9 to 12 to 12 and 12 roof slopes. The staff report says they're all one-story houses. I think every one of them has an occupied second floor, that they're really 1.5-story houses. So the idea, again, of sort of a precedent that throughout Hillsborough Village and lots of parts of Nashville is the idea of this deep roof that allows you to stick a second floor living space underneath the roof. And we didn't even try to add dormers on the front of the house to, again, try to minimize the impact. And I guess the other thing the Historical Commission staff questioned was the use of a covered porch. The guidelines call for porches, and they specify the depth of the rack. So in reading the guidelines, I'm reading that the guidelines are specifically saying a house shall have a porch, and it shall have a porch rack this depth. And so they seem to be asking for covered porches, and again, there are plenty of precedents where, and the idea here was to use the depth that we gain in the covered porch and make the roof slope as low as possible to be able to get a second floor living space up there where it's not visible in the street. So I think basically those are the key points. Any questions? Sure.
Mr. Zeitlin, could you give us, from what I'm seeing on this plan, could you give me a little more basic context? This duplex does not go from street to street, so are we looking at two facades on two different streets?
No, there's another lot on the other street behind it.
Okay. And how is this serviced by vehicles? By one drive?
One drive.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Which house did you say is directly across the street, the one that you wanted to
The very
distinguish?
last page, the house that's painted white with the hip roof.
My house.
So that's directly across the street from this house.
Is there one of the house next door?
Well, the house to the left is the one we did I guess it was probably 6 months or so ago. It's one of the one-story, real simple brick houses. The house to the right is another one of those. And that's another point I was going to make. The staff report talks about how this is a mostly intact street. Of the 7 lots that are immediately around this house on both sides of the street, 4 of those houses are new houses. One of those houses is a front-to-back duplex, and so only one of those 7 houses is actually the prototype that they're saying should be used as an example. So I understand if I were doing an infill house on the 1900 block of Wildwood, it'd be a whole different story because that block is 100% intact, but this block is 15% intact.
All right, anyone have any more questions? Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. And I'd like an opportunity maybe later to ask one more thing, but I'll hold off on that for now.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
We'll see how it goes. Okay, open public hearing. People can come forward. Just a reminder, keep your comments. You can come forward, just first one to the microphone. Just state your name and address, and just remind everyone, keep their comments to 2 minutes each, and Sean will help out.
I'll do my best, but trying to comment some things that were said earlier by Berkeley Allen. I live across the street. I'm Linda Steer. I live at 1819 Wildwood Avenue. It is the larger brick house, the larger structure that he was talking about, built in 1920. I had a specific thing I wanted to address here, but I think I need to lead out with what Berkeley Allen said. I'm not a neighbor who necessarily approves a side-by-side for this structure. I was a little worried when the developer came into the 1820 house and was going to develop it, and then when I learned he was going to make a duplex instead of a single-family home, that concerned me. But I've got to say, and you oversaw this building of this property because it was correct? You were in conservation then, so this was a property that you were involved in, correct? At 1820 Wildwood Avenue?
I would assume, but I'd have to.
You had governance over what happened at this property.
It was an addition, and they were not informed that it was a duplex.
It was not informed it was a duplex. Well, anyway, so anyway, it turned out, it seems like a success. I was really concerned about this property, but it turns out to be a success. And one of the reasons of success is he preserves the look of the house at the front completely. He has allowed for parking for all of the residents, a 4-bedroom unit in the back, a 3 in the front. And my comment was going to be about parking. I have a statement about parking. I can leave it. You can read it later. But it had to do with the fact that he was attempting to keep all the cars on the property and not on the street, which was my big concern about going to rental property. And he could have done that if he could have widened the driveway and just allowed 2 more cars to park in front of the house in a widened driveway when I left the house. The comment of doing a double duplex beside this one, it just seems like you have this, I call it a shotgun duplex. I don't know what the name of it is. It's kind of a shotgun duplex. Beside it is another shotgun duplex and another one. And those are the intrusive houses that are new. But it seems more consistent to stay with what's going on down the street instead of disrupt it again and build a whole other style of a house, like a side-by-side duplex. The other thing I wonder about using a side-by-side duplex is, you say in your statement, you're using Wildwood Avenue. You're using what? May I say a little bit more? Just that you're using. You said real clearly you're using the 1800, 1900 block as your basis for your improvements on the house and not on the house, and there's no side-by-side duplexes other places in the neighborhood. So it seems like it would be better to just let the single-family house be in the front, have them adjusted so it fits properly on the property, because, really, and let them have all the cars on the property, which is what my statement is about.
All right, thank you.
Allow the widened driveway.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Moffitt with Belmont Hillsborough Steering Committee, the Neighborhood Association. I first want to say I do appreciate the design that Manuel has done on this house from the front. It does fit in with the historic homes that are on that street. However, I really feel that this is a game changer for our neighborhood as far as its character. Allowing one duplex to be built behind another one means that the owners of the second house have to walk by the first house down the driveway to get into their front door. If they have guests, they have to walk down the driveway to get in the door of the house behind. It's just an orientation that's not done in our neighborhood. It's been mentioned that the house next door is a duplex that's oriented this way. It was an addition built onto an historic small home, and at the time, am I correct, historic did not know that it was going to be a duplex. But there it is. I think half of our neighborhood is zoned R8 for single and 2-family homes. The 50-foot wide lot, deep lot, is prevalent in our neighborhood, and if this becomes a precedent of allowing a duplex behind a house, then any house can have another house built behind it and come in from the alley to their front door, or if there's no alley, they have to walk by the first house to get to the second house. That really changes the character of what we are. Many people move into our neighborhood because of the quality of life. It's a walkable neighborhood with wonderful sidewalks and tree-lined streets, and having duplexes that are occurring in Green Hills is not what's historic in our neighborhood, and I ask that you deny this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandra Shelton. I've lived at 1830 Wildwood, and my house was one of the ones pictured as representative of the street. I've been there for close to 40 years, and I also represent some residents who could not attend today. Will Wellborn at 1826 Wildwood, Rich Veluzant at 1907 Wildwood, and Jane High at 1916 Wildwood. When I bought on the street, all but two of the houses, one of them being Linda's white house that you see, were minimal traditional style, built right after World War II. And all those houses were one story, about 1,000 square feet or less, with nice yards. It's the reason I bought my house there, because it was a smaller scale with a significant yard. I feel the proposed structure is way out of scale to the historic houses on the street that make up the larger proportion. I understand that Linda's house is bigger, but she also has significant yard. There's plenty of room. The houses being proposed, one unit's 2,900 square feet, the other one's almost 26. We're talking about 5,500 square feet total compared to 1,000 square foot houses, which are up and down the street. I just feel like they're mushrooming up. The size is the biggest issue for me. Then when we talk about the house next door being a front-to-back duplex, when that house was built, I knew nothing about an opportunity to oppose it. I saw the drawings after they were already approved and thought, well, okay, they're at least preserving the house in the front. It is large. There is no yard left. There are hardly any trees, and this is going to go right next to it. Again, the back-to-front duplex, and this is all new design, so it could be otherwise, is not...
That's 2 minutes.
Okay, all right.
But thank you very much.
I'm William Northrup, and I live at 1914 Wildwood, and I would like to support all that has been said in opposition to this plan. There's a lot of exceptions to the cottage historic look in that neighborhood already, but walking through or driving through to see these exceptions, the huge new buildings, the huge duplex, don't fit in. They don't match the neighborhood at all. And I realize there's a lot of philosophy that would justify that going forth, with one house after another house being torn down to replace with this kind of a new plan, but it does not fit in with the integrity of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Are there others? Okay. All right, close public hearing. Open it up to discussion.
I'll just begin with, as we look at this stuff, we need to remember that we're looking at design and not use, and most of what I heard from the neighbors who are opposed to the project, I hope that they can understand that we have guidelines and we have certain tools to try to drive a project a certain way, but when it comes to use, the solution is in the zoning code and not something we can change. So hope everyone can keep that in mind, because it does get muddled. It's easier said than done.
I'd like to agree with Aaron. I think the front-to-back duplex is quite unique. I actually prefer it over side-to-side, but that's not what we're judging here. What we are judging here is how this building addresses the street and how it treats the neighborhood. I'm looking at a memo here that talks an awful lot about increased parking. That's the reason why I asked Mr. Zeitland how cars would be perceived and where they would be kept. And I will also say that if on-street parking is increased, that's actually a very good thing and not a bad thing. It's a traffic calming mechanism. So if there are children, walkers, and things of this nature in this neighborhood, I would view that as a plus more than a minus. I'm hesitant to say this out loud, but maybe I won't.
Any comments about the,
After hearing public comment and also realizing that the front to back siding would be the first, I think. Is that right, Robin? Would this be the first?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
The front to back positioning of the house is a first for this?
First for infill construction.
For this, in this area, or period?
Anywhere, I believe.
Okay.
It's the second.
The other one was in addition to an existing house. This is the first infill project on an interior lot that is a back-to-back.
The other one was an addition?
That's correct.
Okay. So again, we're looking at something that could set precedents. And I'm a little bit confused on where the neighborhood, because we've been shown some pictures. So it sounds like there's a section of that area that is the traditional, and then there's 7 lots, I think Manuel mentioned, that were more of this nature, of the size. So, right? Because I think we're hearing that right. So I think we just have to be conscious of.
okay, that's good. And I know the use is something we can't discuss, but with the insets, they are, but you just saw it too, but I think that starts to try to break it down. Is that some of the comments that you had been, sorry, I'm talking to you, Robin, but is that some of the comments that you talked about breaking down the scale? Because since the use we can't really discuss because it's a zone for it, but as far as breaking it down, well, that's some of the comments that you were looking for. I mean, it seems like that does start to try to break it down some. We've definitely looked at long houses that, so you know what I mean, just specific on some of the things to break down the scale so that it would meet more of the guidelines.
There's a lot of different options
here,
to break down the scale. We were concerned with the scale and the massing, the orientation, and the location of the garages.
Yeah.
I will say that I wasn't here when this overlay was developed, but our director was, and it was my understanding that the people who lived there recognized this was a little unique pocket in the neighborhood and wanted to preserve it. Yes, there are definitely different historic buildings throughout the rest of the neighborhood, and there is an older one just across the street, but this one being a majority of these minimal traditionals that are typically just found scattered throughout and have been approved for demolition, but this area was one that they had wanted to keep intact, so that was our thinking on that, was that this is the context that the neighborhood wanted us to preserve.
Robin, if let's say theoretically, if this were a single-family unit, would staff have the same recommendation because of its size?
That's correct. The massing felt was inappropriate for the neighborhood.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, given that staff didn't think that this project met guidelines 2B1, A, B, C, E, F, and I, given that there's that many potential issues, I'd like to suggest that we sort of go through one at a time, each category, talk about it, and see if we can sort of take bites, given the number of issues that we have and the fact that this would be brand-new precedent. It's pretty complex. Is everyone okay with that?
I understand where you're going. However, we're not designers. I mean, those of you who have backgrounds, but.
So I didn't mean design element by element. I meant height and scale, setback rhythm, through the...
On hearing what the staff was feeling that way, okay.
Through the various guidelines.
Okay. I guess, taking it from a context of if giving the architects some feedback on where we stand. Is that sort of the objection?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And so if everyone's okay with that, with it in mind, I guess we start at height and scale, which I think is, it's the first one. It's essentially 2B1, A and B. And again, because we're not talking about use, I think we look at it as this is a building, and it's a residential building, and we need to compare it to the other residential buildings. And for me, if this was East End, Lockland Springs, and we talk about how it's an eclectic neighborhood, and you have lots of different styles, different scales, I feel like we're more liberal about the size being a little bit different, or even sometimes a lot different than the houses immediately adjacent to it. I think when I read staff's opinion and their recommendation, it seems that they look at this differently and say, this is a largely intact set of these post-war minimalistic homes, and so it's out of scale relative to that. And then we have the fact that Mr. Zeitlin introduced it, there's a very large house across the street. So for me, the threshold issue is, when you're looking at scale, are we going with the assumption that this is an intact, minimalistic neighborhood and that's what we're comparing to? Or is there relevance to the home across the street? And I don't necessarily have an opinion on that yet. I just think that seems to me, when you're talking about scale, a threshold issue that we have to sort of figure out before we can get too far.
That was one of the things I was going at too, as far as trying to breaking down the scale, because these, I don't know the address of these two buildings, but they're just two houses over. You can see them. They seem like they have more of a massing to it. I don't know do you see them on the?
Yeah.
So, and then even right directly across the street from that too. So I guess that's why I was concerned about, just the breakdown of the massing, because it does seem like that little pocket, but, two houses over, it changes. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure we talk about that too.
I think that's worth acknowledging, and that there's sort of a separate issue between, does one of these houses that at one point was part of this intact cluster, does it automatically have to be replaced by something like that? Because we're saying, it's different than saying the cluster is protected, because the cluster is protected. This one was demolished for a different reason. It wasn't that it wasn't protected, it had other issues.
Gotcha.
And I don't think there's anything in our guidelines that says that whatever was there before is relevant. It's really contextual to the neighborhood, not the house that was there before. So that's something else that's kind of bouncing around in my head as I try to figure out where to go.
Any more comments on, we're just talking through these things, but any more on these, on scale and height? We talk about setback and rhythm, spacing. And I'm going to keep throwing it to you since you kind of started, but.
When we talk about the height, we were at 24 feet. What is the scale, the height that we feel that it should meet?
Well, I guess the first question is, which context do you want to look at? The overall neighborhood or these two blocks? We looked at these two blocks, and those were between 20 and 23 feet tall.
Even the what about the one directly across the street? It's not?
It's just one house. It was just one. The majority of this block, the historic buildings, are minimal traditional. There are several newer homes that are much larger, but we typically don't look at later homes as being part of the context.
Okay. Do we have an aerial view slide?
It should be on page 3.
Well, it is. I thought if we could.
I don't have a slide,
okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. But I think Aaron is referring to the two houses that are down Wildwood.
Yeah,
I see those too. We all see them together. what are the dates of those? I mean, were they,
They're not historic, but...
I don't have that information with me today. We just, again, looked at those 2 blocks and these historic buildings that you see in the screen that were built in the 20s and 30s as being the context.
okay.
Let us keep discussing this a little bit, and then we'll get back to it, okay? What about you? What about setback? Did you have any comments about that? And was that one of them?
Yeah, on setback, it seems that from staff recommendation, it was okay with the width, but there was an issue with the setback, but based on what Manuel gave us, it seems that that's been resolved. Does that sound right to you, Robin?
We haven't had an opportunity to review the new plans, but I'm sure that should be an easy fix, the rear setback.
I think too, we ought to make sure we talk about, and I think this gets to yours a little bit, it's just the whole side entry into the garage, you know, if that is something we have talked about a lot, so.
So, you want to talk about orientation?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the only guidance the guidelines give us that are actually in the guidelines themselves and not italicized are that the new building's front facade shall be visually consistent with surrounding historic buildings. And we don't get any other flesh than that, other than, I guess, how we've interpreted that in the past.
So really, it comes more down to context. It thinks that we really, that's kind of the big one.
But also, there's nothing that stops us from creating interpretations of orientation now, too, especially given that we're looking at something, I think, that's pretty new in terms of 2 side-loading garages and a second residence that is not oriented forward.
But I think perhaps we can agree here that I think our problem and the neighborhood's problem is that, given the context, whether it's 2 dwelling units or not, our building is too big, in a nutshell. And even if it addresses the street appropriately, it seems to be too big. Now, forget for just 1 second the side-loading garages. I would love to see them on the side than on the front facade. I mean, they have to go somewhere, or they have to go nowhere. But the double occupancy aside, it sounds like we have too big of a building within the context of its surroundings. And
And I think, there's so many guidelines that are, thank you, that are in question. And as if it were just 1 or 2, and we could work through those and give staff some suggestions on what we feel would be appropriate. But I just think there's so many that I don't know that we can sit here and analyze them and see through that for this neighborhood.
I tend to agree with that, and the heightened scale, I think, is one that is difficult because of how we define the context. If we're defining it based on the homes that are right here above us, or whether we're looking at a broader context. But even putting that aside, I think there's significant issues with the orientation, and that 2 side-loading garages, I can't imagine that's ever been approved, and seems like something that we need to think long and hard about if that's what we want to do, because I think that would defy a lot of people's expectations about what our guidelines allow.
Okay, I think we might be close to a motion then.
Are we permitted to ask the architect if he would like to defer or?
Well, I think he's definitely ready to come to the podium, so. Open the public hearing.
I'd ask about one more thing. I'd like to get your direction. I've got another alternate, so I wanted to get direction to make sure we're on course that in terms of the issues that are raised, that for submitting for the next meeting, that we wouldn't be going down another dead end, because we've got, our client wants to get moving.
Okay, so are you
If I could just hand it off to
deferring?
them.
Are you making a move to defer then?
Well, I'm assuming we're going to get denied, so I wanted to get
Well, you can
feedback on.
You can defer it if you like. I can't tell you to, but if you like to defer it to next month and have a chance to work with staff, they even, part of the recommendation says that if to get more stuff reviewed.
Well, my question is, I would like some feedback from the commission, because the staff took the position that the house across the street isn't a relevant precedent, and I don't agree at all with that. I don't know how you design, I don't know how you have an historic district if you start saying historic houses aren't a precedent that are not only in the district, but directly across the street. So I wanted to see if I could get an interpretation from the commission to say that, yes, the house directly across the street from this house should be a relevant precedent.
I don't think we want to go there today, given that we barely have a quorum, and I think that needs to be a healthy discussion. Hopefully, if you resubmit next month, we'll be able to have a healthy discussion.
Having also met with staff and conferred with them, you could give us one, we could give you direction, but that doesn't mean that this is something we're necessarily going to approve just because we haven't had really adequate time to look at it.
So what you're saying, I guess the question is,
I think this basically.
What you're saying is we should just deal with staff on it, basically.
Yeah.
But the concern is that all of a sudden you've got a staff that's saying, well, this historic, we'll pay attention to some historic houses, but we won't pay attention to the houses that don't really fit what we're trying to implement here. So I think there's some more questionable.
We'll be pretty.
I agree that's something we need to figure out.
We'll vet it out, but if it's still something that's.
Okay, so am I correct that we should defer this?
It's up to you, but if, okay.
Yeah, why don't we defer it and continue the discussion?
And I just wanted to remind the board also that you recently adopted a rule dealing with new information. So to the extent that any of the information would be shared where staff has not had an opportunity to review, then that would be inconsistent with the rule that you recently adopted. And I do realize it's a new rule, so people may not be aware as to that rule having been adopted by the board, but I just wanted to remind you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so 1818 Wildwood Avenue is deferred to next month. Next one on the list is 1705 Woodland Street.
Okay, switching over to the other side of town here, 1705 Woodland Street. It's an application to demolish a non-contributing structure and to construct a new two-family dwelling with a detached garage. The new structure will be 2 stories tall, 32 feet from peak to grade at the front, and it will be 40 feet wide. The width is consistent on the structure from the front to the back, and essentially from the foundation up through the second story. The surrounding context is mostly 1 or 1.5 story houses, but some of those have very steeply pitched roofs, so they're actually pretty tall. And there are some 2-story houses very close nearby. So staff found that the proposed height is compatible. The widths of historic houses vary between around 28 feet to 35 feet, with uniform lot widths of 50 feet on the street. There's a well-established rhythm of solid and open space, and staff finds that the massing of the proposed new structure would disrupt that rhythm. The historic houses on the street also have forms that help to break up their massing. You can see here they're either bungalows or Queen Anne's. There's a pyramidal roof essentially the upper story massing is less than the first story massing. Again, staff found the height of the proposal to be appropriate, but feels that reducing the width of the proposed structure to be something more compatible with the context, breaking up the upper story could make the scale more compatible with its surroundings. Other aspects of the proposed design, like the pitch and form of the roof, the exterior materials, the proportion and rhythm of windows, those staff found to be compatible with the surrounding historic context. There is a fairly standard condition that staff would ask to review the windows and doors and specific roof prior to construction. There's also, I think I mentioned at the beginning, a one-story outbuilding at the rear of the lot. The structure will be essentially a four-car garage, but divided to serve each unit of the duplex with its own two-car garage. The materials and form of the roof will be compatible with those of the house and with the surrounding context. The ridge height of this garage is about 16 feet. Like I said, it's really a true one-story, and it stretches across the full width, 10 feet from the rear property line, and it would be 3 feet from either side property line. Staff found this location to be appropriate. It does require a determination or a reduction of the setback, but again, staff found that to be an appropriate location for an outbuilding. Site plan also shows HVAC mechanicals being on the sides of the structure but forward of the midpoint. Staff would just ask that those be pushed back to be behind the midpoint of the structure on the side elevations or located at the rear, but either one of those would be fine. And in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the application with the condition that the width of the building and the massing of the upper story to be reduced to be compatible with the context, that staff approve the color of the roof and materials of windows and doors, and that the mechanicals be located behind the midpoint of the structure. In meeting those conditions, staff finds the proposal to meet the guidelines for Lockland Springs Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay.
Have you talked to the applicant about how much about the width to be reduced? Have you talked about a dimension?
I've mentioned something like, well, since it's a duplex, obviously they're going for wider units, but the commission has approved similar structure in a different neighborhood, but at 36 feet wide. Certainly narrower would be better, but then there have been times when 36 found to be appropriate for the front, and then perhaps even getting wider towards the rear, or with bays in the middle that make it a little wider, but generally around 34, 36, something like that. It is what staff has recommended, but the applicant is here. I didn't know he was here, sorry. I think he might want to address that.
Okay.
Sean, can I ask Sean one question? Is there on the accessory building, is there a guideline on maximum square footage?
Under the bulk zoning regulations, there would be, but in the historic zone overlay or conservation overlay, it's really the determination of the Historic Zoning Commission. Staff's recommendation, it is a duplex or a two-family structure, so we know that there's a different need than there might be. So we were sort of seeing a trade-off. Yeah, and being that it's a one-story structure helps. If it were 2 stories, that might not be as appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sean. Applicant like to come forward?
Thank you. My name is Van Pond. I'm Van Pond Architect, 1200 Division Street. Thank you all. We really appreciate staff's input. In some ways, you can't redesign a whole structure in a week to respond to recommendations from staff. We have reviewed this with our client, and we do understand the concern about the rhythm of width and spacing between houses on the street. Lockland Springs East End is a little bit different in some areas. Some streets are incredibly consistent in the width of houses and the width between houses. Some are absolutely inconsistent. Some of the illustrations in your packet on page 10, one of those houses is a full 40-foot wide house on a 50-foot lot. It's a single family, but it's a two-story and it is a Queen Anne house. It's on a street that has wider, narrower. That's Holly Street. It's not a double lot. The other house is on a double lot, so it is able to spread some more, and that's the same thing on page 10. We understand the concern about a two-story mass that's unbroken and symmetrical, about the scale and in the context of the rest of the street with the lower roofs, the pyramidal roofs, and they're taller. We understand that concern. We are absolutely willing to articulate that facade, and whether that means slipping the units side to side. I can give you a proposed illustration. I've only got one. Pass it around. It shows what that could do and also could do with the roof massing, which I think would break up some of the apparent mass in the street. It would end up having a 20-foot front gable and a setback lower eave roof. Still the same height structure, but that would break up the apparent flush width across the street. We are perfectly willing to work with staff on whatever is approved here. We would like to ask for consideration that we be able to use the full zoning width in order to do that, to maximize the property and also to maximize the private space for each of these individual units. We are here for your consideration and look forward to speaking with you. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Just to make sure, so really the width is only one that you'd like for us to consider. The other two
The other two were absolutely, yes.
Any more questions to Van? All right.
And if we have to reduce the width, we will, but we would prefer to keep it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone would like to open public hearing, would like to speak on this regarding this project? Just say your name and address.
My name is Matt Schutz, and I live at 605 South 10th Street, very close to Lockland Springs, East End. I just want to say that, offer my support to this project. I know the commission approved, and Van may have mentioned this, a house at the end of Holly Street that's about 40 feet wide, but with less articulation. And I find that this particular project, and the way it's articulated, the way the roof shapes come together, feels much more broken up. And this particular property occupies a similar lot to the 40-foot wide house that was approved previously. It's on a dead-end part of a street as it goes towards the park and looks across over a field on the opposite side near Lockland Springs Design Center. So again, I feel that this is a better solution than one that has been approved in the past, and offer my support.
Thank you. Are there others? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion?
I guess I might just say that the flip side of what I said before about duplexes and use, I think applies again, that we need to think about, would we approve this if it was a single-family home, especially the outbuilding? I agree that it minimizes this significantly to only have one story, but I don't remember us ever approving a 44-foot wide outbuilding. And I don't think there's anything in the guidelines that says we can and should do more or be more flexible because of the use. And when I look at this one, it is big, and there's 2 units, and I can understand the want and the need, but it's essentially, if I'm looking at this right, a 7,000 square foot structure with 8 bedrooms on a 50-foot wide lot. I mean, it's big.
Robin, can we go back, or excuse me, Sean, can we go back to the slide that, one of the first slides you showed us that had the lot width and heights and things of that nature? And I also agree with Aaron, this is one of the biggest outbuildings we've ever seen.
The other houses on the left and right, are they contributing?
Yes, 1701, 1703, 1707, and 1709 are all contributing.
1703 and 1707, correct?
All of the ones except 1705.
Okay.
Would they be needing a setback, asking for a setback reduction for the outbuildings? It looks like it is larger, wider than the structure itself.
Yes, for the outbuilding.
Okay. All right.
The width of the main building doesn't potentially bother me as much. The outbuilding did seem large, but I did notice that you, Sean, didn't have any comments on that, did you? Did we?
No. Again, it doesn't meet the bulk zoning setback regulations, but typically, historically, outbuildings would have been located at the rear of the lot, sometimes much closer. Here, of course, you're getting a setback reduction on both sides because it's over 700 square feet. In fact, I think it's closer to 1,000 square feet. But again, the finding essentially with a trade-off between height and width, the height being reduced, the massing was still pretty comparable to what might be allowed normally on a similar lot for a single-family house.
I'll go back to Aaron's question. Would we allow that outbuilding that size for a single-family dwelling?
I'm reluctant to speculate on such a broad hypothetical. There are, thousands of properties. It's not. It certainly wouldn't be appropriate in every location, but there certainly could be some where it would.
Just the history of the outbuildings and how it's evolved, I would not be favorable to this.
I will say that, and I'm not saying this was right or wrong, and it is a different neighborhood, but I know that I can think of at least one 4-bay garage that's been approved that's a good bit taller. That's not saying that's right or wrong, just throwing that out there.
They didn't have to have a setback reduction.
I do not remember.
Is that close to where I am, where I live? Oh, I just remember one that was...
In my short tenure on this commission thus far, we've been very stringent on outbuildings, and this is one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. And I understand that it's a duplex, so it's trying to match up. I believe that there are other alternatives. We have disapproved some outbuildings, I believe, for lack of a better term, with more merit. More merit as to their use because of their size. And this is just massive. It's just absolutely massive. Other than that, I'm pretty much on board with all staff's recommendations, but I think the outbuilding is a big concern here.
How about the 40-foot width?
Absolutely. No, the front building, are you, you're saying you'd like to see it smaller per staff? Is that what you were saying?
Yes, sir. And I think that can be accommodated without too much harm. I'm looking at the street right now, and the context is obvious. And we're only talking about 5 feet here. If you take the widest lot on 1701, 5 feet.
How do we address if we are agreeing, I'm agreeing that with staff recommendation, but we also wanted to
Add something.
sort of add to what we need to do with the outbuilding?
You can add that in as a condition. I would call it back to the design guidelines, and it sounds like that may be height and scale. And the specific guideline for outbuildings.
Okay.
I would say too, before you do this, just you guys talk about it. The original elevation, I think, and just as an opinion now, but just you guys talk about that before you do this. Okay. Does anybody want to do a motion?
Motion.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry?
Can I add something to the record for clarification?
Sure, you can.
Just for purposes of record, this is not a 7,000 square foot house. This is a 4,200 square foot divided duplex. It's 2,200 square foot apiece with an 1,100 square foot garage proposed. I just want to make that clear in the record that we're not trying to pave the world in East Nashville.
Okay, thank you.
So I only got that from, it says Unit A is, the footprint is 1776, and it looks like 2 stories, so multiplied that by 2, and then multiplied it by 2 again for Unit B.
That's incorrect, then.
The 1776 is, or my?
It's a 20 footprint. The footprint of the houses are 2,200 square feet for both. That's the footprint on the land. So it's 1,100 square feet per unit, 2 stories, 2,200 square feet per unit total, and then the garage is separate.
Okay, so it's different.
I just want to make that in the record.
Okay, anybody want to craft a motion?
Yeah, I will. I'll move approval with staff recommendations on the condition that the applicant continue to work with staff on the scale of the garage in the back, the outbuilding in the back.
And that looks like it's 2B.2.
Can we discuss before we vote? Just, I think we should give staff some,
Wait, before we head, I'll second that.
sorry. I think we should give staff some guidance as to how much we want them to try to reduce the width.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's very simple. If you reduce the width, it's going to be by 1 car on each side.
Oh, so you're saying
it's a 4-car garage, 2 cars per unit.
Sorry, I'm talking about
the building.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The first bullet point in their recommendation.
I would say they try to get it down to at least 35 feet, which is comparable to what I'm seeing here along this street. That's a good place to start.
Okay. And I think it'd be a little wider, but
don't take what I'm saying as to be set in stone, but I'm looking at 35 feet wide, 32 feet wide, 28 feet, 34, and I don't think it would be the end of the world if it were a little wider either, but I mean, if 40 feet's okay, then when is 45 feet okay and all these?
What if, then we...
I don't think we need to come up with a footage. I think we need to leave it to staff to work with the architect to something that works within and meets our guidelines.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay, so we're really not amending the motion at all. So all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion carries with staff recommendations and with the added conditions.
Could I add for a clarification, you said you were not changing the staff recommendation, but you did add a condition, is that right? For the garage?
Yeah, we're recommending all the
I just wanna be
staff
sure.
recommendations, but we added the condition of the width of the outbuilding.
Thank you, just want to be sure.
Next one on the list is 1902 Fifth Avenue North.
Okay, now it seems working. Okay. Wait, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry about that. Okay.
1902 Fifth Avenue North is an application for a new duplex infill on a vacant lot. The proposed structure meets the base zoning setbacks and meets the design guidelines in terms of location and setback. The duplex will be 36 feet wide at the front and will expand to be 40 feet wide, about 13 feet behind the front wall of the house. The duplex will be 1.5 stories and will have 2 symmetrical entryways. Staff finds that its height of 27 feet at the front and 29 feet further back meets the design guidelines. However, staff asks that a condition of approval be that the wider portion of the house have a lower eave height to better match the historic context. This taller section I'm talking about is marked with a circle on either side of the facade. The eave heights in question are indicated in the red. In addition, staff asks that the windows on the second-story dormer be brought closer together so that they are a paired window with a mullion in between them. Here are the 2 side facades. Again, marked with the circles are the eave heights that we're asking to be brought down lower. Also, you can see marked with the other circle is a faux window opening, and staff is asking that instead of having the faux window opening with the transom above, that there be windows that are more in keeping with the historic pattern. Staff has been working with the applicant, and I think we've come up with a solution for that, which works. The known materials have all been approved by the commission in the past, and the staff asked to review a brick sample, shingle color, and all windows and doors, and the materials for the porch floor, front porch columns, and the porch floor prior to the purchase and installation of those materials. Staff also asked that the double windows have a 4 to 6 inch mullion in between them. Here is the rear facade. Here are the floor plans showing the 2 different duplex units. And here are some context photos. The top 2 photos are the houses on either side of the site in question, and the bottom photo is the house directly across the street. And here are 2 more images looking south along Fifth Avenue. In conclusion, staff recommends approval with the following conditions. 1, the wider portion of the house have a reduced eave height or be relocated to better match the historic context. 2, staff review a brick sample, shingle color, windows and doors, and materials for the porch columns and floor. 3, the siding have a maximum reveal of 5 inches. 4, double and triple window openings have a 4 to 6 inch mullion in between them. 5, the front dormer windows be brought closer together so that they're a paired window opening with a mullion in between them. 6, the faux window openings on the side facades be reconfigured. And 7, the HVAC unit be placed on the rear or on the side facade beyond the midpoint of the house. I believe the applicant is here and can answer any questions. I'd just like to say that we've been working closely with the applicant, and I think we've worked out many of the conditions. I think the 2 things that are in question are bringing those eave heights down and making sure that the window and the front dormers the windows are brought together so that they're a paired window.
Real quick, Melissa, on the side elevations, the rhythm of the windows, was there any more discussion? I'm not studying the plan, but especially the right elevation. Now, they both are toward a house, but the rhythm seems a little...
I think if the window openings where the faux window openings are now are brought into compliance with the historic proportions of windows, that the rest of it, particularly kind of beyond the bump out, you won't really see as much, and we're more flexible. The staff is typically more flexible the further back you get from the front facade. It's less visible.
They'll flow a little better.
Yeah, I mean, like the picture window, and that's pretty far back in the house, so I don't think you'll really even notice it much. But the commission can have that discussion if...
Okay, thanks, Melissa. And the applicant is here if you'd like to come forward and say anything, or just say your name and address.
I'm Larry Prater. I'm the owner of the property there, and I was having a hard time hearing what she was saying, but actually the plan is those eave heights is actually in error. I was pushed, my draftsman was really pushed to get these plans through to the commission for them to approve it or whatever, but actually, in actuality, that plan, the eave height is going to be down lower. The 3 eave heights will be pretty well symmetrical in distance from each other. So therefore, that area there that she's talking about is going to be within like a foot lower or closer to each other. And I just wanted to point that out. And I'm okay with everything else. The window, getting the windows closer together and putting a single mull or a wider mull on the front dormer. And then on the side elevation, the one big transom, we're going to go with just two smaller windows.
Okay. Any more questions to the applicant? Okay, thank you.
We good?
We're good?
If you're approved, he will give you the revised drawing showing that
Well, they have 7 things they have to do, so.
Yeah, so we'll ask for revised drawings before approving this project, yes.
Thank you, Melissa.
Open public hearing. Would anyone like to speak regarding this project? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion or motion?
Hearing no discussion, I'll move to adopt staff recommendation on 1902 Fifth Avenue North.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next one on the agenda is 1910 Linden Avenue, also known as 1908 Linden Avenue.
So 1910 or 1908 Linden Avenue. 1908 Linden Avenue is a vacant lot that until recently was the side yard for 1910 Linden Avenue. So the reason why both addresses are on there is Metro is still listing this property under 1910, so all the codes information is under 1910, but it's our understanding eventually the address will be 1908 Linden. The applicant is proposing to construct a new infill and a new garage on the property. The infill will meet all base zoning requirements for setbacks and meets the design guidelines for setbacks, location, and orientation. Here's the front facade. The new infill will be 2 stories tall, which matches the historic context where there are several 2-story structures. The house's height will be approximately 32 feet above grade, which is similar to other structures in the area. However, staff asks that the foundation height be reduced to the front so that is a maximum of 2 feet at its lowest point, which will account for the cross slope of the site. There's a pretty significant cross slope, but we just want the foundation height to be brought down lower. The infill is designed so that there is no foundation beneath the front porch, which makes the front porch columns unusually tall and out of scale with the character of the district. Staff asks that the porch columns have a typical foundation matching the foundation of the house, and that the masonry bases for the columns stop at the porch floor level. On the front facade, staff also asks that the shutters on the second-story central window either be removed or be made so that they're full-size, fully operable shutters. Here are the 2 side facades. You can see the front porch columns in these images, which is open under the porch. So we would want that again to have a typical foundation. On the right elevation, which is the image on the bottom, the second-story bay towards the front of the house, marked with a red circle, is atypical. Staff asks that it either be reduced in width or eliminated entirely. Here is the rear facade. The no materials for the house have all been approved in the Belmont-Hillsborough Conservation Overlay in the past. They include cement fiberboard siding with a 4-inch reveal, MirrorTech trim, split face block foundation, asphalt shingles, and the weather wood color. The windows will be Marvin Integrity windows, and the front door will be wood. The porch columns will be Polypro, and the column bases will be stone. Staff asked to approve a stone sample prior to purchase and installation. The porch floor will be cypress wood, and the rear porch will also be wood. Here is a rendering of the proposed infill. And the applicant is also proposing to construct a 21-foot by 24-foot outbuilding at the rear of the property, accessed via the alley. The garage meets the base zoning setbacks and has an eave height of 13 feet 3 inches and a ridge height of 20 feet 3 inches, which is subordinate to the historic structure. The materials for the garage are similar to those for the infill. Staff finds that the proposed garage meets the design guidelines. And here are some context photos. These houses are all on either side of the site, so on the same side of the street, same side of Linden. And then here are some houses across the street on the other side of Linden Avenue. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the infill and garage with the following conditions. The foundation height be reduced so there's a maximum of 2 feet at its lowest point. The porch have a typical foundation matching the foundation of the house, and the stone bases end at the porch floor level. The right elevation, second-story bay, be reduced in width or eliminated entirely. Staff review the windows and doors in a stone sample. The shutters on the front facade, second-story central window be removed or be designed so that they are fully functional shutters. The HVAC and utilities be placed on the rear or on a side facade beyond the midpoint of the house. And finally, that staff approve all new appurtenances, including fences and walkways. I think the commission received several comments from neighbors on this property that was forwarded to you, and I believe the applicant is also here. I can answer any questions.
One quick elevation question.
Sure.
On the left side, picking on windows today, but the ones that are lower, those double bays, I guess that's in the stairway?
On which
top?
elevation? Just want to
The
make sure.
left side elevation. On this one, it'd be the top elevation, the one that doesn't have any red dashes on it.
Right. So
Well, it does
that
have-
smaller window,
The one that's the double window in the middle, that's lower than doesn't.
Oh, in
have
the second story.
Yeah, second story.
Yeah.
It doesn't line up with anything. I think that's in the stairway.
Let me look at the plans. I don't have the plans in the presentation.
Yeah, I think it's right there.
Yes, I believe that is a stairwell. Those are stairwell windows.
Is there a ceiling though, why it can't go higher, or?
That's probably a question for the designer in the.
Okay.
I can't answer that question, so.
All right, nope, sorry. Okay, would the applicant like to, thank you. Any questions from Melissa? Okay, thanks. Okay, would the applicant like to come forward? Just say your name and address.
Good afternoon, Brent Craig, 2013 Castleman Drive. We have worked with staff and we will be doing all the recommendations, and that is a stairwell window.
Is it not low because of the ceiling, or?
We have it so you're able to see out of it from the landing of the stairs when they go back. They go up to a landing and then reverse themselves and go back up to the second floor.
Okay, so if it was higher, you'd only see it when you're coming down the steps?
You would only see it if it was the same header height as the rest of the windows. You'd only see it if you were standing on the second floor. You wouldn't be able to see out of it at all.
What about the seal? If the seal was the same, just
the seal is it is the same height off the landing as the other windows are off the floor, which is 2 foot.
Okay. If that were raised, would that cause a lot of?
Oh, it would destroy the house.
Okay. Okay.
It's over with.
It's over, dead deal, right?
It would just render the windows where the customer couldn't operate them, couldn't use them.
I see. Okay. Any other questions to the applicant?
I just have one other comment other than the recommendations. I know that they've received some comments from a neighbor, and Manuel and I have talked as well about doing some brick and some other exterior finishes to maybe break up the amount of siding that's on the house. And we'll be working with Melissa, and we've already discussed some different items with her to get with the neighbors. I think there's a couple of them here, as Manuel told me, outside, and to do some exterior changes as far as the cladding and finishes to possibly break up some of the all the siding.
Okay. Okay, so that, which thing is that? One of your conditions?
There was not a staff condition regarding the siding, but the neighbors have expressed concern about it, and so there's the applicant's proposing brick. Either one, the staff would find either one appropriate. Right. It meets the guidelines the way it is, but we want to be sensitive to whatever the neighborhood and what we need to do to make it appropriate. And we'll, after I spoke with Manuel earlier, and we'll get with I believe the neighbors that are here, and Manuel set something up, and we'll then get with Melissa on what the consensus is.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So, do I get to leave my windows where they are, or do you want me to go?
Well, let me think about that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, open public hearing. People who would like to speak regarding this project, just Say your name and address.
Hi, David Thompson, 2005 Linden Avenue. I live catty-corner across the street from this proposed infill. I'm also on the Belmont-Hillsborough Neighborhood Steering Committee, and I've been authorized to speak on behalf of Belmont-Hillsborough neighbors. I think the conditions need to go a little bit farther. I know that the owner, builder, talked about adding brick, and if you look at the other homes on this street in particular, they're all brick, they're all stone. There is some siding on some of the houses, but the vast majority of the houses are brick or stone of some kind. So it's not just breaking it up a little bit, it's really important in order for it to fit in with the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. I'm particularly concerned about the front porch and this stone that's going to appear on the columns. To me, it looks like lick and stick. It's not consistent with what's in the rest of the neighborhood, and it needs to be something more substantial. It needs to be brick with mortar or true stone with mortar in order to fit in with the rest of the neighborhood. I'm also concerned about curb cuts. There's not a driveway to this property. We certainly don't want a circular drive built in front of this home. There are no circular drives on this street. I know that circular drives have been built in this neighborhood by this owner also. I think there is support in the guidelines for the comments that I'm making. On page 10 of the guidelines, item 6, new construction should respect and not disrupt the established pattern and rhythm of existing historic buildings on the same and opposite sides of the street. That supports my comment regarding brick siding, and then also the staff's recommendation regarding the open porch design on the foundation. That should not be approved. It should be filled in as the staff recommended. Also, materials, texture, details, and material color. That's on page 11 of the guidelines. And it says the materials, texture, details, and material color of a new building's public facade shall be visually compatible by not contrasting greatly with surrounding historic buildings. Again, I think that supports the brick, and then also not having the open foundation underneath the front porch. And then also in the guidelines, it states that generally curb cuts should not be added. So I think that that supports my request for no curb cuts, and I would like for those items to be added as conditions to the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others?
Hi, my name is Laura Swanson. I'm David's next door neighbor. I live directly across the street from the proposed development. I sent emails. My husband sent emails. You probably received those and read those. I won't repeat everything. David has certainly covered a lot of our concerns. Our biggest concern is that the house really looks like a stock house. It does not look like a historic home. There are homes that are almost identical to this plan. We took some time, my husband and I, when we found out this weekend that this hearing was occurring, to go and look at some other homes built by this builder outside, primarily outside of the overlay. We looked at houses inside and outside the overlay. And there are 2 or 3 homes, we sent photos of those in the Hillsborough West End neighborhood that really look almost identical to this home. That's a great concern of ours. You don't see that in historic neighborhoods. So we're more concerned. We want the staff recommendations to be adopted, and I certainly appreciate that the builder is here and willing to speak with neighbors, and we're certainly willing to speak with him. But we are concerned about the general design not really fitting the historic context in addition to the materials. Another area that we're concerned with that David did not mention, my husband and I, is the wood steps. The front porch really looks like decking, and the wood porch and the porch on the homes that we viewed on Hillsborough West End also looked more like decking to us with wood stairs. Wood stairs are just not common at all in a historic neighborhood, and that's a very substantial feature of the front of a home. Brick, certainly, almost every home. I found one home, I walk all the time. I walked Linden just to double check this fact. There's only one home that's primary clapboard construction. Of course, it's real wood, and because it's an older home. The homes are brick. They're brick on all the front 3 sides. There's one home a couple of doors up from this that is half stone, but otherwise the homes are brick. And I feel like the overlay, requires that the home meet the rhythm and the context of the historic structures around it. So even though, hardy board is allowed as a material, should it be the substantial material on a home that is surrounded by homes for 20 and 30 homes this way and 20 and 30 homes this way that are primarily brick? It really, and looking at the homes that were built that look like this home across the way in Hillsborough West End, it just looked like this home home looks just like those. We'd like to see more custom. Thank you.
Lindsay Moffitt, Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Association. I wanted to make one request too. I'm aware that this builder has clear-cut other lots that he has built on. This lot has a substantial stand of trees on it, and if it's not within the building pad, we'd like to request that there be some preservation of the canopy, tree canopy. We've done a lot of investing in our neighborhood in preserving current trees and adding to that canopy. It mitigates a lot of the water runoff that we are having issues with in our neighborhood, and we respectfully make that request.
Thank you.
I'm Becky Bembry. I live at 1914 Linden, about a couple of houses down. And mostly what my concerns have been addressed already. I just want to affirm that they are also my concerns. It's a great big hardy board thing, and we'd like to see brick at least wrapped around the sides. Maybe halfway back would work with some sort of architectural device for transition to siding. And the porch, in some neighborhoods there are wooden porches, but not in our neighborhood. It just doesn't go with it. I'd like to see a concrete porch top and concrete steps. And also to be sure that a sort of a larger hand-cut looking fieldstone is used for the piers and foundation, or something that looks like that anyway. And basically the other staff recommendations are definitely necessary and good. So thank you.
Thank you. Before you talk, let me make sure, is anyone else in the audience like to speak regarding this? Okay, I'll go ahead.
Hi. I have no problems adding to the recommendations, no curb cut in the front. Is that what we're requesting? Yeah, we had no plans to do a curb cut in the front with a garage in the rear from the alley.
Let me ask you a quick question. So there is no, I've never been able to find this circular drive that people have talked about.
Well, that's about other thing. I installed one because a neighbor across the street, and Fred called on Sweetbriar, and then we removed it.
Okay, so no,
and so we've
there
never
will be no circular
installed. We did, but we removed it.
Okay.
On another house.
Ma'am, the homeowner then put it back, but we removed it.
Okay.
Because it was not.
Okay. I'd heard about the circular drive, and I could never find it. Yeah, I couldn't find anything.
Right.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problems. I have no problems with the curb cut. No problems if that's the consensus of the neighbors. Once we meet the all brick, I have no problems with all brick. It will probably eliminate the stone issue in the front, because we'd probably do brick columns in the front then and not stone. So it would all be the brick and the knot. The concrete porch issue for us, the wrapping around the front, the block is not. The cypress is more expensive. It creates a little bit older home feel. If the consensus is concrete, I have no problems with that. It's a little bit cheaper product than the cypress. So none of the issues they're talking about, I have a problem with adding if we need to, or just a commitment from us usually is fine. But I do want to clarify two things. We've never clear cut a lot unless a customer's requested. It's the only way, and then we're probably referring to one on Sweetbriar that we fought not to do. But we always try to preserve as many trees as possible. So I want to get that out there, and we've never installed our a circle driveway that we didn't have to remove. So we have no plans on installing a temporary circle drive again.
Okay. So everything but my window, right?
Everything but your window. Well, I don't know yet. I haven't talked to you. I don't know if we got to get back up here or not. But I think that addresses everything.
Windows concern us forever too. I didn't get a chance to say.
The windows.
Well, I tell you what we'll do. We'll just make it a staff recommendation to add on whoever gives it. Just
all those things. That's fine.
that we will.
The community or neighborhood meeting notes or something. If we want to do that.
We'll wrap up a number 8 that does it.
Excellent.
Somebody will. Aaron. Okay. Anything else? I'm going to close public hearing. Motion? Discussion?
I want to make sure you're good with those stair windows first.
Okay, because it's further back and Melissa didn't have a problem, since it seems like it's further back and the applicant is very willing to do so much everything else, I think we're okay with the windows.
In that case, I move for approval based on staff recommendation with the added conditions in order to memorialize a lot of different points we talked about today. Condition 8 would include that there's no additional curb cuts or circular drives added, that rather than the hardy board, it'll be at least primarily brick on the facades, and that the steps be concrete rather than wood.
Steps and porch.
Steps and porch will be concrete rather than wood. And I think that covers 90% of the concerns.
Yeah, and just work with staff.
And to the extent, with all of those issues, some of them are rather vague, so the applicant will need to work with staff to get the nitty-gritty details ironed out.
Okay, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, 1910, staff recommendations. Next on the list is 1512 Paris Avenue.
Okay. 1512 Paris Avenue. This is currently a vacant lot. The application is to construct a new two-story house on the vacant lot with a detached garage. There was a non-contributing house there previously. The new house will, as I said, be 2 stories tall with a front gabled roof. The front elevation's on the bottom there. The ridge height will be 31 feet from grade, and the eaves will be 16 feet high. The side walls will have projecting gables with higher eaves, similar to wall dormers, but not exactly. And it's not a common feature, but there is actually a comparable house just across the street with somewhat similar form. The building, the primary width will be 35 feet across the front elevation. It's worth noting that the lot is 60 feet wide. All in all, the scale of the proposed new building is compatible with surrounding historic houses. This image shows houses across the street that have similar height and widths. 1507 there on the left is not historic, but the other two-story buildings there are. The roof form, as I said, along with the exterior materials, which would be cement fiberboard for the siding, and window proportions and rhythm of windows, staff finds to be compatible with the historic context, with the one exception on the front elevation. It's not typical for upper story windows to be taller than first story windows, so staff has talked to the applicant and asking for those proportions to be revised. And also staff would review the window and door materials along with the roofing color prior to approval. As I said, there's a outbuilding also proposed, 1.5-story outbuilding. The scale is subordinate to the house. The roof form and the materials would be compatible with those of the building and surrounding historic buildings. I hope that shows up on your screens better than it does there, but the plan shows that there to be a covered breezeway leading from the back of the house to the garage. Staff recommends that that breezeway be reduced in width or eliminated to avoid conflating the massing of the house and garage into being one structure. So just a more minimal connection there. Also, the plans should be revised to show a walkway from the front porch to engage to the street, and the locations of HVAC would also need to be reviewed by staff. In our conclusion, staff recommends approval of the application to construct a new house and accessory building with the conditions that staff review the materials, roof, doors, windows, et cetera, prior to selection, that the upper story windows are generally not taller than those on the first story, particularly the front elevation, that a walkway be added from the porch to the street, and that the mechanicals be located on the rear or side behind the midpoint. And lastly, that the cover over the walkway from the garage to the back of the house be reduced. In meeting those conditions, staff finds the proposal would meet the design guidelines for the Belmont-Hillsborough overlay.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Sean?
Yeah, Sean, on the window issue about would you, not necessarily, you're not necessarily saying reduce the upper windows, but maybe increase the size of the lower windows?
That would work. I think we talked about maybe, I think the top windows are 6 feet tall and the first story are 4 feet, so they could both go a foot.
Okay.
And just, as long as they were not taller on the second story, they could be the same.
I just thought if you put that size window, they'd look sort of squatty, but anyway.
Squish them down too much,
So,
yeah.
you're working with both the windows. The whole idea is that the windows on the top are not to be any bigger than the ones on the bottom. Okay, thanks.
Sean, one more thing. You had commented that the cover over the walkways from the garage be reduced. On the approval we got, it says eliminated.
I wondered about that. I'd written something and we'd made a revision, and I think I printed a couple before it got...
So which one is it, eliminated or reduced?
I find with reduce.
Okay.
Reduce generally to 6 feet wide or less. Anything wider than that, with codes, building codes, not so much us, but runs the risk of it being determined to be attached, and that it's not going to be attached. So.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Would the applicant like to come forward, or? Thanks.
Hi, William Smallman, 2702 9th Avenue South. Spoke to Sean. Everything seems to be pretty simple changes. I'm okay with it. Only thing I'd like to discuss is the connection to the garage. Right now, it is larger than staff recommends width-wise, but below it is, I'm trying to cover staircases and have the potential to put a handicap ramp in if need be, and I'd like to have that covered as well. I don't know if it's possible, but if it's a way, instead of looking at the full mass, say the roof can be larger, but what's below it is not as wide.
Is the applicant disabled, or?
No, but I have elderly parents that, I'd like to accommodate for. And it doesn't have to be covered, but in the perfect world, I'd say it's better to have it covered than not being.
Well, you were saying about the width for the ramp. Is that why that's what's set the width?
If we cover the ramp.
Or you're okay with the less width?
I'd prefer to have it to where I can cover the stairs down. If not, it can work. It just won't be covered.
Okay.
But if there's any exception to that, it would be great. But other than that, everything else looks great.
Sean, I know, and you said the cover over the walkway. So you're talking about the roof itself, just because we're dealing with massing and the appearance of the massing. Is that
just reduced,
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. There was that issue with the application a few months back where it was, we got into that, is it a attached garage or detached garage? So in order to avoid any confusion altogether, that's why originally we thought about saying eliminate, but that's going further than really is necessary. If it's a narrow connection, then it's pretty clearly still a detached structure, so we felt comfortable making that part of the recommendation.
But just to clarify, Sean, it complicate everything for us. We're talking about the roof, not the footprint.
Correct, yeah, the roof. It could still be, you could build a deck that wouldn't be reviewed, that would be much wider.
Okay.
But if the roof itself were 6 feet wide or so.
So it's the overhead structure only?
Correct.
Thank you.
To address the potential sort of ADA issue, is it possible to have your steps, have them covered within the width that's recommended by staff, and then if the need is there later, convert those stairs to a ramp? And maybe you wouldn't have stairs, but you would have a ramp that could be covered if covered is the concern.
There's not. It would either be a covered ramp, and then as you get to the top of the ramp, it would be uncovered leading into the house, or not covering the ramp. Just with the limit of 5 to 6 feet isn't enough to accommodate it all.
Okay, thanks a lot. Open public hearing. Anyone like to speak regarding this project? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion or motion?
One more clarification on that massing. Massing would be a mathematical thing of house versus lot. You know, when you're saying because you don't want to have it covered, I don't want to make this complicated, but I want to be confirmed that, you know, it being covered would give it massing and not being covered would give, that would be not an issue. So
I recommend backing up a little bit. The reason that initially we didn't allow for covered walkways at all, because garages should not be attached. And at what point, as Mr. Alexander said, at what point is it attached and at what point it's not? And then we decided, okay, well, maybe if it's just a minimal 3 or 4 feet wide, it's appropriate to have a covering from the garage to the house. And that's all the commission has allowed to this date. If it gets much wider, then it becomes a space where they're encouraged to enclose it and make it conditioned space, and then all of a sudden you have an attached garage. That was really the reasoning behind it.
Clear.
Because I think we all want to tread lightly on that, because that was a very difficult one and a lot of confusion a few months ago. Susan, is there any kind of sort of overriding sort of disability issue or hardship mechanism to take care of the issue he's describing if we didn't reduce it today?
I would have to really look at...
I'm sorry, if we did reduce it?
I would really have to look at that more closely. I wouldn't be able to opine just based on the discussion today.
Are you saying like...
From an ADA perspective, is that what you're speaking of?
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to, it doesn't sound like the need exists today, so I'm inclined to not do that, but I also don't want to preclude someone or preclude them from being able to come to somebody at some point to address that if the need becomes realized at some point.
Right, and I think any changes to the exterior would have to come back here anyway. So there would be an additional opportunity to review. And then under Title 17, if there are any issues with regard to the ADA or any kinds of reasonable accommodations necessary, the zoning administrator actually has authority to grant a reasonable accommodation. And since historic zoning actually falls under Title 17 of the historic zoning, or the historic zoning code, I think his purview to grant a reasonable accommodation, if that is necessary, would include that. But I think to the extent that it would require something structurally or something design-wise that this commission should approve, it would have to come back to the commission to be approved. So you're not foreclosing that by your approval today, because it would have to come back to you, and a reasonable accommodation request could be made to the zoning administrator.
And that part of it aside, just looking at the design, what we have is a proposal with stairs and no ramp, from what I understand. And the doors look like they're right across from each other, so I'm not sure why the 4 feet or 3 feet wouldn't be enough to cover the ramp, but it may be because of grade, but we don't have all that information as to whether or not there needs to be a switchback with that ramp, or, you know, what it would be. And so
Okay. Everybody ready?
I move for approval based on staff recommendation with the clarification that the walkway from the garage be reduced, not limited.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Motion carries with recommendation. Next one is 1411 Ordway Place.
(1411) Ordway Place is another application to demolish a non-contributing building and construct a new house and detached outbuilding. Just while I'm there, that's the non-contributing structure in the middle of two contributing structures on either side. The new house will be 2 stories with a gabled L form. The house will have a ridge height of about 30 feet at the highest point, with eaves at 20 feet from grade for that front projecting gable, with the side gable and eaves sitting about 3 or 4 feet lower, 3 to 4 feet lower. The width of the building will be 36 feet wide at the widest, but that's only 23 feet wide at the front projecting portion. Obviously, that side gable section is a bit back from the front. The roof form, as I said, is a gable. It's a standard roof form or common roof form in the area. The materials, asphalt shingle roof, cement fiber siding, split face block foundation are pretty common. The window rhythm and proportions are compatible with those of surrounding historic houses. Staff asks to review the specific window and door selections as well as the roof color prior to purchase. The outbuilding will be 2 stories tall also, with a footprint of about 550 square feet, a little bit less than that actually. The roof will also be cross-gabled with a ridge height of 25 feet and eaves at 14 feet from grade. These proportions are subordinate to the primary building, and staff found that to be compatible with the historic context. The roof form, as I said, is cross gable, another common roof form in the area, and the materials will match those of the house. The garage will be accessed from the front by an existing driveway. It's not a common condition generally, but it is found on several historic houses on this block. The alley, it seems, behind this, and I think Calvin Street is behind, doesn't run all the way across. Staff would ask, as usual, to verify the HVAC and mechanical locations to make sure that they are on the rear or side behind the midpoint of the house. Just quick shots of some context. Those 2 on the left are on the other side of the street. And then the picture on the right here, 209 North 16th Street, is a similar plan constructed last year or the year before in the same neighborhood, as you know. Historically, a lot of houses were built from pattern books, so it's not uncommon to find very similar houses next to each other down the street. You know, you see a lot of folk Victorians or craftsmen that have similar forms. That's what gives a historic district a lot of continuity in its character and scale. So staff certainly found that to be appropriate. Our conclusion, staff recommends approval of the application with the conditions that staff approve the color of the roof and the materials of windows and doors, that a walkway be added from the front porch to the street, and that the location of mechanicals, HVAC, be approved by staff. And meeting those 2 conditions, staff finds that the proposal meets the design guidelines for the Lockland Springs East End overlay. Oh, yeah. There is an applicant here. Okay. It's not the one I thought, but there is an applicant here.
Thanks, Sean.
Hi, I'm Brent, 2013 Castleman. I am not the applicant or the owner. I'm actually the builder. I can just answer questions if you have them. I don't know a whole lot other than what the architect drew. I think everything's pretty straightforward about the conditions, pretty standard, and we really like the house. And there is no window halfway up on the stairwell side.
I was looking. When I saw you. Any questions to? Okay. Thanks. Open public hearing. Okay. With that, we'll close public hearing. Discussion? Motion?
I make the motion.
Sorry, I forgot to ask staff just one question. It looks like there sort of is alley access technically, but is it one of those deals where it dead ends and it's just not maintained and it just in practical terms doesn't exist?
Yeah, something like that. It's certainly strange. I know, I forget which, maybe the house
You'd only have 7.5
to the right has alley access, but this one and the one to the left does not, or vice versa. I don't remember how far
Okay,
the
so
alley
it's
goes.
not, practically speaking, it doesn't have alley access?
Correct.
Okay.
And again, I guess I don't have an aerial here, but there is an existing driveway, as is there for many, but not all, of the historic houses on this side of the street at least.
Okay. Motion?
Make a motion to approve 1411 Ordway Place with recommendations from staff approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion carries with staff recommendations. Last on the list is 1918 Shelby Avenue.
The context for this proposed mixed-use building is mainly residential. The top image is to the right of the lot, and the bottom image is across the street. Also across the street at the corner is a historic auto-related building and a non-historic gas station. The project is to construct a two-story commercial building that consists of two separate forms connected with a breezeway. Staff recommends a condition that final detailed drawings be submitted prior to the issuance of a permit. The grade changes dramatically from the front corner to the opposite rear corner, and at its highest point on Shelby Street, the building is proposed to be 33 feet 6 inches tall from the existing grade. The building also includes a trellis roof that adds another 9 feet in height. The eclectic context, which includes small one-story homes as well as 2 and 2 1/2-story homes, does not support the 34-foot height requested. In 2006, a duplex was approved at 915 Shelby that's approximately 30 feet tall, and in 2005, a one-story home was approved down the street at 20 feet. So staff recommends that the overall height be lowered so that the building is no more than 30 feet tall from the lowest point of that existing grade to better match the context and to also meet the bulk zoning requirements. Although the proposed will still be taller than the majority of the buildings in the immediate vicinity, its flat roof and location at a low grade will minimize its height. The steel columns of the porch are narrow compared to the massing of the building, and appear about out of scale. Also, typically porch posts, even on commercial buildings, have some type of post and cap. So staff recommends a thicker post that includes some type of post and cap. The project meets its context in terms of setbacks, roof form, orientation, and proportion and rhythm of openings. The corner building would be clad in stucco on the left side and on the front corner, but brick on the right side. The smaller building would be clad in brick on the front. Materials for the right side and rear were not indicated. Because materials typically change horizontally rather than vertically, staff recommends that the entire corner building be stucco or brick rather than half stucco and half brick. In addition, staff recommends staff review facade materials for the right side and the rear elevations. The design, manufacture of windows and doors, brick, parking area, and stairs were not indicated. The location of the HVAC and other utilities was not noted. No signage has been proposed at this time. The applicant did meet with MDHA yesterday, who also has authority in this area. They approved the concept and also asked for drawings with more detailing and additional information about dimension, materials, use, and parking requirements. Staff recommends approval with the conditions that more detailed drawings be submitted prior to the issuance of a permit. The overall height, not including the rooftop pergola, be lowered to 30 feet as measured from the existing grade at the front. The front porch posts be thicker to be more appropriate to the overall scale of the building and include a cabin base, which the applicant has agreed to. The applicant obtained staff approval of the details and materials for windows, doors, bricks, and pavers. The corner building be all stucco or all brick, and the HVAC be located on the rear facade or on the roof. With these conditions, staff finds the project to meet the design guidelines for new construction in Edgefield, and the applicant is here if you have any questions.
Robin, one clarification, minor. On our packet, it says Edgefield Historic. On the agenda, it has Laughlin Springs.
That's my fault. It's Edgefield.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Is this new?
That's new.
Sure.
Got it, Randy?
Hey, yeah, you have.
I think you're around. Everything is just a corner context and then beefing the columns.
You're on.
All right.
Just say your name. I'm sorry. Name
I'm
and
John
address.
Donaldson. I'm on the corner there. I think we're basically working within the context of what she's asking for in the way of beefing up the columns. I guess the only issue that I see being the grade that changes across the street. I know we had talked about this a couple of years ago, but the way it drops, I think we're at an average right now of 30 feet in the height. I know out at the corner where it extends out, if you can go to like an aerial view of it. Do we have an aerial view in here? No. Site plan. Yeah, there we go. The area that sits out to the farthest part of the corner out there, if you take that, then I guess it would be considered 33 feet there, but the building itself sits further back, so we're, because of the grade change. Go ahead.
I guess first, so you're basically, the only thing you have an issue with is the height, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just a matter of how you come about the height, because...
And this is just the next level of development that you've passed out, Matt?
It should reflect basically the drawings that you've received. And
I'm sorry too, Matt. Say your address.
I'm sorry. I'm Matt Schutz, and I've been working with Mr. Donaldson on the project before you today, located at 918 Shelby Avenue. And I'll try and describe some of the additional drawings that we've put before you today, as well as just go through basically how we arrived at this point.
Well, and I think the main thing is it seems like and if you guys correct me if you want to see more, of course, but if you're okay with all the conditions,
well,
just the ones that you may have.
I'll talk a little bit to that.
Okay.
It's really been our goal since the beginning of this design process to present a structure that reads of its time, 2013, but remains considerate to its historic context. Or I should say and, because I don't think that they're mutually exclusive terms. We're proposing a pretty straightforward commercial corner building that has form similar to existing two-story commercial buildings in the neighborhood, and with details paying deference to the mid-century context at the corner of 10th and Shelby. And if you turn to the second page, figure 2, in one of your packets, you'll see that mid-century streamlined modern building. The historic and commercial context at 10th and Shelby, as we've just said, is mid-20th century streamlined modern, a style for which denuded and slender steel columns are typical. Also, the design guidelines call for compatible contemporary construction, not the replication of past styles, and we feel that, push too far to traditional columns with classical basis and capitals would create the type of paste-on faux history that the guidelines expressly discourage. With respect to materials, it's evident from visual inspection that historic commercial facades exhibit changes in color and texture and material, especially across distances in excess of 50 feet. The 5-Point Commercial District is a good example of this assertion, and if you turn, I believe, to figure 4 in your packet, you'll see an example of the 5 Points Commercial District. If you turn to the next page, figure 5, you'll see some of the context along 10th Street and Shelby Avenue. And then if you turn again to figure 8, 9, and 10, you'll see some examples of past commission approvals that have approved multiple materials and not just one single material. Building height is typically measured from grade at the setback line, and I think that's something we're close to working out with Ms. Ziegler as well as the MDHA staff. However, should there be any discrepancies, we remain committed to working with historic zoning staff, MDHA, and Metro Codes to assure that the field measurements match the final construction drawings. Though, at the time, if you take a look at your additional drawing packet in the front elevation, we've added dimensions as well as an estimated grade line to show that we believe that we are 30 feet from grade, even as it exists in these drawings. We additionally are committed to provide staff any additional drawings, details, and material samples as necessary for a preservation permit. That would include the location of HVAC at the rear of the building, which is our intent. We thank you again for your consideration today. We sincerely believe that requiring a single facade material and paste-on column features would directly conflict with the core preservation principles established in the National Secretary Standards and the Edgefield Design Guidelines. And so that's why we'd like to keep some of those features. I'll turn it back over to Mr. Donaldson here. I think in terms of making the columns a little thicker, that's something that we've discussed. However, adding a capital may bring it into that pace-on category that typically the guidelines discourage. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions as they come up.
I don't really have too much more to add to it. If you got anything you want to ask,
So the two things, and you guys correct me, but there's the 30-foot that you believe the averages you're there, and you would like to keep the same material and not have, you'd like to keep
I'd like the
different
opportunity to actually have stucco if possible. I mean, I know that there's other context in the 5 Points area where there is, I guess mixed materials, but that, or if we need to go to a different texture brick, I mean, I think the main thing is to...
I just wanted to be clear what you're...
Okay. And as far as the columns, I mean, I spoke with Ms. Ziegler yesterday about it, and I guess there's a way to address it'll look modern for a capital and base, but it's more just a riveted seat connection type thing, so.
Okay. Any questions right now for the applicant? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, open public hearing. Does anyone in the audience like to speak regarding this project? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion?
Just a little discussion on the staff recommendation for the corner building be all stucco or all brick. Why was that recommended?
Typically on historic buildings, they don't change materials on the front facades vertically. They might change at the floor line. Commercial buildings, though, usually are all just one material. Maybe a different material in the back, but this one's very visible from 3 sides, that front corner and the 2 street sides. So we thought it'd be more consistent with the historic context to have that be all one material, rather than stucco on one side, stucco on the corner, and then brick.
May I have an opportunity to respond?
But let us finish up here.
So when I'm reading 2B for new construction, relationship of materials, it's not real specific on having it all one material. It seems to give some leeway on shall not contrast conspicuously.
Right, and that's where we were coming from, that typically commercial buildings are all one material. On residential buildings, you saw a change at the floor line. So again, if you look at the historic context, they don't change materials dramatically on front facades.
That's not a big deal for me.
Provide an opportunity to respond.
Let's finish our discussion real quick, and then let's just see where it goes.
I mean, I'm looking at this particular corner. I think the aerial, it shows across 10th Street, there's a building. I think that's vacant now. There's a gas station, kitty corner, and then straight across Shelby, there's that car wash that will be scraped at some point. And I think there's not a lot of context around there, and I'm sort of inclined to allow maybe more flexibility, A, because it's commercial, and B, because I think that whole corner is literally starting over. And that's kind of where I'm coming from.
We'll have two concerns. It sounds like one of them has been taken care of with the 30-foot height. If they feel like they've reached that at that corner, and that's great. The drawings, while nice, are still in a very conceptual state. Should we be approving drawings of this nature, or do we need to wait?
No, it's fine, it's this one, but one of the conditions, if you don't mind me.
I saw the condition, but.
Yeah, we normally will, we can approve it, but just they have to make sure they submit it again to staff, that they did not deviate from what we agreed to.
Fair enough.
Okay, my question is, as we're looking at the new handout that you all handed us, the rooftop, is that a wearing surface, obviously? And how's the roof going to be used?
Is it a what surface?
The roof surface. I mean, there's railing around it.
Yeah, it's
sort of
a rooftop deck.
A rooftop deck?
Yes. The use intended for the building was to be a restaurant. For the main corner building.
Okay,
5 Points Redevelopment District.
Pardon?
It's in the 5 Points Redevelopment District.
I'm right down the street from it.
Okay.
And I know about the rooftop and the issues that we're dealing with rooftop restaurants, and this makes me leery of proving that, maybe conceptually, but is there something that they would need to come back to us if in fact that's put to that use?
Excuse me, I have my timer on.
My 5 minutes is up.
Only if the design changed. I mean, because we don't review use. I think what you may be thinking of are issues we've had on Broadway and 2nd Avenue, which are historic buildings with rooftop additions where everybody wants to push it towards the front. Is that right? Or
that is correct, but I mean, I guess I'm dealing with noise, and this is in the middle of a residential area.
Right.
So.
I want to say, I live directly across the street, and the area, I mean, while you could say it is residential, for the most part, it's not. The house.
You are behind you.
Here. I live directly across the street. I live at 513 South 10th.
I work on Vanderbilt campus.
Okay,
I know noise.
Yeah.
And my concern is, I could see this potentially. I just want to be really, really concerned that we're not getting into an area that's going to really be an uprising in the community.
I understand.
And there's no reason that we couldn't.
I mean, there are metro codes that say that what your decibel level in noise. I mean,
yes.
but it's also a matter of managing it. This is pretty big. And it can generate a lot of noise.
Yeah, I think that falls under somebody else's deal, but,
Well, the fact is that we're approving a structure that's going to be used for that. I mean,
Yeah,
but we just need to be aware that.
well, since we've opened them up, do you still need to address that? Anything, Matt?
I'll quickly respond to, historic buildings typically have one material. And I think you can say that is true, but if you go to 5 points, you're typically looking at buildings that are 25 to 50 feet wide. And the front of this lot is about 100 feet wide. The width of the building is somewhere between 75 and 100 feet. And so I think when you take that sort of cross-section and look at a historic section of buildings, they will change materials over that distance. Maybe one single historic building is one particular material, but over a distance of 75 or 100 feet, you'll see 2 or 3 historic buildings. So what we wanted to do was to remain compatible with that distance, not with a 25-foot historic building.
One last quick thing for Robin, please. Back to the roof. I know we've dealt with this on Broadway very recently. With your conversations with the applicant, are we in line with the distance with the railing from the edge of the roof? Because I don't see any of that information here. So or can we just assume that we're on track with?
On track with?
With the distance of the railing to the edge of the roof?
The distance that we normally deal with on Broadway is in those design guidelines. These follow different design guidelines.
Okay.
And that's to protect the historic building. In this case, it's all new construction.
Okay. So that's not a real concern for us right here, right now.
It's minimal enough and set back enough that staff felt it wouldn't be terribly visible. And the pergola part of it's flat roofed and set back. So we thought that would be appropriate.
Great, thank you.
But as you all do review the plans, once they come in with dimensions and everything, okay, y'all will take a look at that. Okay.
I don't think I heard the applicants address the front porch post. Did they?
Yeah, they did.
So that was good. They're good with that. Cool.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, does anyone have a motion?
Can I clarify, does that include the materials or?
You jumping in front of me, Matt.
Sorry.
Does he have windows I can disapprove? Just remember, I just wanted to, remember, if you guys want to make an amendment to that, you can about that. I know Aaron.
I'd like to I think I sort of said where I was coming from, and I don't necessarily disagree with staff on what I would personally prefer. I'm not sold that it sounds all that great what they're proposing in terms of the different materials, but I do think it's a blank slate on that corner, and I'm open to something different and maybe unusual, so I would amend it to give them, is it a motion to amend?
Always get this messed
We need a
up.
second it first.
Yeah, we have to second it first.
I seconded that.
Or don't. That's fine. Okay. We always get messed up when we do.
What might be a little bit easier is if the one making the motion and the one seconding it agree to it, they can just say, we agree to amend our motion in that way, and you don't have to go through.
Good job.
We agree to amend the motion.
We agree per Commissioner Kahlberg's comments and suggestions.
Is any further action required to amend it? Okay.
So I think I can just restate the motion. So the motion is, we recommend approval based on staff recommendations with the exception of the change of materials, but we still want you to work with staff, but we are okay with the change of materials. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Is there any other business?
There's still 3 more items.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, like 3 more buildings. 1721 Fifth Avenue North. Sorry about that.
1721 Fifth Avenue North is an application for a duplex infill on a vacant lot in Salem Town. The commission approved a design for a duplex on the site last month, but this application represents a new design by the same applicant. The proposed duplex will meet all base zoning setbacks. The site plan shows that the duplex will be situated 20 feet from the front property line, but the flanking historic houses sit closer to the front property line. Staff therefore recommends that the new infill have a similar front setback to the structure at 1719 Fifth Avenue North, so the line of the front porch of the duplex's left unit lines up with the front porch of the neighboring property at number 1719. The applicant has already agreed to this condition and submitted drawings this morning reflecting that, and staff finds that to be okay. The new infill will have a gabled L form and will be 30 feet wide at the front, expanding to 40 feet wide, about 30 feet behind the front wall. The duplex will have a ridge height of 25 feet 6 inches at the front, with a maximum height of 30 feet. Staff finds that this meets the context where the historic structures range from 16 to 32 feet tall. The known materials have all been approved by the commission in the past and include 5-inch cement fiberboard siding, asphalt shingle roof, and fiber cement board and batten panels on the projecting side bays. Staff asked to review the porch column, porch floor, and foundation materials. Staff also asked to review the window and door selections and the roof color. Here's the rear facade. Here are some 3D renderings of the duplex. And finally, here are some context photos. In conclusion, staff recommends approval with the following conditions. The house be pushed forward to match the front setback of the property at 1719 Fifth Avenue North. Staff review the materials for the porch column, porch floor, and foundation, and approve the window and door selections and the roof color. And finally, the HVAC be placed at the rear or on a side facade beyond the midpoint of the house. And as I stated earlier, we've been working with the applicant, and I think all of the conditions they are willing to meet. And are you? The applicant is here if there are questions.
Would you like to, or you?
I have to tell you.
If you do, just come on and say your name and address.
Anita Howard's 200 Carden Avenue. I really don't have a lot of answers for you because my sister is the one who's really working on the design. So I'm here as kind of a representative of our property and what we're doing, and if there are concerns, it sounds like she's pretty much worked out everything, the little details that are left, but if there are other concerns, then if you can let me know, and I will happily take it back to her.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll open public hearing. Okay, if there's no one who wants to speak on it, I'll close public hearing. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next on the agenda is 915 Petway Avenue.
The next item is 915 Petway Avenue in the Greenwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. This application is an application for infill construction. The house that you see in the photo, I believe it's still there, but staff has issued at staff level a permit to demolish it as it's non-contributing. The new structure will meet all base zoning requirements for setbacks and will be situated slightly off-center on the lot to allow for an existing driveway. Here is the front facade. The new structure will be 32 feet wide and will have a height of 22 feet 3 inches above the foundation line. Staff notes that the foundation height is unnecessarily tall and asks that the foundation be a maximum of 2 feet in height at the front of the house. With the reduction of the foundation height, the height of the structure seems it does meet the design guidelines. Staff finds the porch columns to be unusually tall and therefore out of scale with the historic context. Staff recommends that the column bases the column bases end at the edge of the porch instead of continuing down to grade. Here are the side facades and the rear facade. On the right elevation, marked with the red dotted line, staff asked that the window openings towards the front of the house be enlarged so that they're more typical window size. We thought that they would best be approximated to the size of the windows in the gable field. With the enlargement of the windows on the right elevation, staff finds that the infill's proportion and rhythm of openings meet the design guidelines. The materials for the infill have all been approved by the commission in the past and include cement fiberboard lap siding, cedar shake, MiraTech trim, concrete slab foundation with a parge coat, and asphalt shingle roof. Staff asked to approve all final materials. And here are some context photos. These photos are all on the same side of the street as 1915 Petway. And then these houses are all directly across the street, or directly across the street and looking slightly down from the site. In conclusion, staff recommends approval with the conditions that a central walkway be included, the foundation be no more than 2 feet tall at the front porch column bases end at the level of the front porch. Staff approve all windows and doors and a brick or stone sample. And 5, window openings on the east facade towards the front of the house be enlarged so they are the size of the windows in the gable field. With that, we recommend approval. I believe the applicant is here if you have questions for him.
Thanks, Melissa.
Hi, I'm Bob Potter. I own Kudzu Homes. I'm the builder and the owner of the property. Just a brief history. I've built or renovated about 60 houses, primarily in the East Nashville area, although typically I don't jump into the historic ones like this, but I got caught off guard because I didn't realize that Petway was fell into an overlay. So this one and the following one are both mine, 915 and 919 Petway, so there is some consistency there to be considered between the two. I'm happy to comply with whatever needs there are from the staff on these. The only exception would be the request to enlarge the window on the east-facing side. Really, that has to do with just the functionality of the room. If you look at the floor plan in there, I would almost prefer to eliminate the window rather than enlarge it, making it virtually impossible for furniture placement inside the house.
Is that just because of you want to have more wall space there?
Yeah, otherwise it's a high window to allow, placement of a sofa or something there. If I put tall windows like on the front, you're going to end up putting furniture up against a window. I'm just looking at the functionality of it. If that's what it needs to be, that's what we'll do. But it may be better from a functionality standpoint just to not have a window there, if that's the case.
Okay. Any questions to the applicant? Okay, thank you. Open public hearing? Okay, if anyone wants to speak, I'd close public hearing. Discussion?
I don't think ordinary windows preclude furniture. My sofa's against, my living room's against a window. And I think it will look, I think staff's recommendation on that will produce a much better aesthetic on the exterior. So I move to approve based on staff recommendation, 1915 Petway.
All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carries. 919 Petway Avenue.
It's going the wrong way. We already did that one, didn't we? Okay. Let's put it in the wrong order there. As Melissa and the applicant said, this is very similar context. It's 2 doors up. Again, a non-contributing house for which I believe a staff permit for demolition has already been issued. And the applicant would then construct a new single-family house. The house will be 1.5 stories tall with a side gable bungalow form. The roof will be 28 feet tall from grade with eaves at approximately 12 feet high. The house is 32 feet wide, and these proportions are compatible with historic houses nearby, very in keeping with the bungalow form. Generally, the design and materials are very appropriate. Cement fiber siding, fiberglass or composite asphalt shingles. Staff, as with the others, recommending that the window proportions be more compatible. Typically, first-story windows are larger, taller than upper-story windows, and also that the rhythm of windows be more in keeping with that of historic houses. Primarily, that would be for the upper story there. You see the windows towards the front of the house. Also, on this application, staff found that the condition of having porch columns extending essentially to grade was not typical. Typically, porch columns with the brick bases there, brick would stop and sit on the porch floor rather than continuing. So that would be a condition to revise as well. On this one, there is a gabled front dormer with the front wall of the dormer stacking directly over the first floor wall. Staff recommends that the dormer be pushed back 2 feet, as is typical and more compatible with historic forms. Here, just pictures of two different types of gables or bungalows. The one on the left, towards the upper left there, has the porch is recessed within the primary roof, and on that type of bungalow, you often have a dormer that sits with the front wall over the porch area, as there was on the previous application. Down on the right there, you see a bungalow with a projecting front porch, and where you have a projecting front porch, the dormer is actually set back from the wall of the house. In effect there, it works out that dormers are always pushed back from the leading edge of the primary roof. And on the left, the primary roof contains the porch, and on the example on the right, it does not. So that's because this is a projecting porch that's not continuous with the primary roof of the house, we would ask that the dormer be stepped back. In summary, staff recommends approval of the application with the following conditions: that the front porch column bases not extend below the level of the porch floor, that staff approve all window and door materials, brick sample prior to purchase and installation, that the upper story windows are not taller than those on the first story, that the dormer be pushed back from the front face of the wall below, and also that a walkway be included to engage the front porch to the street, and that the mechanicals are located on the rear or side of the house beyond the midpoints. With those conditions, staff finds that the application would meet the applicable sections of the Greenwood Conservation Zoning Design Guidelines.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions? Okay.
Sean, is it?
Matt, Sean, sorry.
Sean, is it stepping the dormer back? That's not on the one that we received. Is the front porch columns extending in front of the front porch and stepping back the dormer from those two examples you gave? Is it an either or?
No, I
didn't quite follow that. Sorry.
Here on the front elevation, you see that it has brick continuing to grade from the piers of the columns. Typically, maybe you can see it on some of the, I guess the way the fences are, you can't really see, but porch columns sit on porch floor. They don't extend down beyond. It could, something like that, so that the foundation from the floor down is continuous, and then the piers sit on the porch floor. And then the dormer was separate. I'm not sure if that was in the written recommendation, but certainly it's a condition that staff is recommending now. That because it is fairly closely following the pattern of a historic bungalow, that if it's going to do it, it should do it more Yes, exactly.
On the front porch, the columns that are both on either side of the front door, it looks like they're coming down, that brick wall is coming down the steps.
Yeah, those are like cheek walls or wing walls.
Are we allowing that?
I could see that as being separate than the
outside,
actual
okay.
outer columns. It sort of would.
Okay, I mean, that would make it look different from the house 2 doors down. Yeah, okay. All right.
Yep. Back again, Bob Potter. The dormer issue is a little bit problematic for me. We are trying to build within, and I guess before I get into that, we're going to drop these down onto slabs so that the overall height of the project, and then parge coat the slab rather than put it up on a high foundation. So that will take care of the column issue with the brick and everything on the front, as well as keeping the height more consistent with the neighborhood. But in terms of the dormer, my challenge here is that we're trying to stay true to the neighborhood and build a story and a half house. And I'm not the person up here overbuilding for the size of the lot. I'm putting a single-family house that's appropriately sized for the neighborhood on a 50-foot lot, not a duplex, not 4,000 square feet, 2,100 square foot. But we have to get that space. I have to get space somewhere upstairs without increasing the footprint. Functionally, this plan won't work if I push that dormer back 2 feet because there is a bedroom up there that would eliminate, basically. So I'm wondering if there's some leeway in terms of that. Just driving East Nashville, there's quite a bit of inconsistency with how dormers are placed, the style of the houses. I mean, it is an eclectic mix of homes. I'm not sure having the dormer lying up with the front facade of the house is going to be, a horrible situation. We're trying to, I think, strike a balance here between building new houses and not trying to replicate the old houses that, that exist in these neighborhoods. We're trying to, we are still building a new house, right? And my understanding of the historic guidelines is we're trying to build something that's complementary to the neighborhood, not try to mirror exactly what's there. Now, I could be wrong with that interpretation, but Greenwood Neighbors doesn't have a whole lot of infill construction that's taken place in this neighborhood. And I'll say the big boy developers haven't jumped in and started jamming the big houses on these lots and asking for these, for those. So we have an opportunity here to get a couple appropriately sized houses built and in there before the property values start going crazy. I would love for the opportunity to be able to do something that I think fits well with the neighborhood, if there's a way to make it work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, open public hearing. Okay, seeing no one, close public hearing. Discussion.
Sean, what would be your recommendation? I mean, if they back that off a foot, but I know dormers, we've dealt with dormers and been back and forth, and we certainly don't want to start precedents. And
that's my only concern, is that is a consistent request of the commission for several years. And I certainly respect what Mr. Potter's saying, because he's absolutely right, and we've worked with him before and does a great job in the neighborhoods. But I am concerned about how that will change that precedent that you have set now for several years.
And if we set it back a foot, that's going to be a 14 by 8. I mean, a 14 by 9. But is a foot enough?
That's completely up to you if you want to change that precedent.
Well, I mean, right now it's at 2 feet, right? Okay.
I may be still misunderstanding the issue that I was trying to ask Sean, but is it possible to move the porch columns in a way that make this not a situation where you'd be required to step back the dormer? No?
They're not related.
Okay, I clearly don't understand it very well.
This has been a condition that was set prior to my time, this request for the 2 feet, and I believe it's because historically that's usually what you see, certainly not in every single case, but typically that's what you see, and it helps reduce the massing of these dormers that on new homes are usually a good bit larger than what you've seen historically. So Mr. Alexander's been here longer than I. He can jump in if he thinks there's other reasons for that.
Sean, can you show that, just put that elevation? Yeah. So this is where it's going to be set back. And I want to make sure here too is what condition is that falling under?
Well, it was certainly addressed in the analysis of the staff recommendation. In the cover sheet that is essentially just a one-page summary synopsis of what's gone into further detail in the pages below. I guess I put in 4 bullet points. I should have put in a 5th on the dormer.
I didn't see it, and I was trying to see if this is something new or it's just something that just didn't make it to this.
But I just didn't get it onto the synopsis there. On page 6 of the staff recommendation under height and scale, I did write that with the condition that the dormer is moved back 2 feet from the first story wall. Okay. So I apologize for that.
If we were to accept it, do we need to add it since it wasn't part of that, or does it matter since he actually presented it?
No, you can just add it in.
Okay.
I think there may be significantly less risk of creating bad precedent if we wanted to allow it in this situation. If the intent of it is to reduce massing, it sounds like the intent of that rule. I don't think that's the issue with this house. This is almost half the size of a lot of the stuff that we see on a regular basis.
It's to match the historic context as well.
Right.
It is just something we've always...
Sean, could you please put back up the 2 pictures of the 2 homes so we can look at them real quick? And so the difference here, if you'll clarify for me, please, top left, were we talking about porch columns with these pictures or dormers?
Well, this would be for the dormer. Here, it's one roof plane that doesn't break. It just continues down, and then the porch is essentially within the footprint of the house. And then in that case, the dormer sits on or the front within what would have the porch below. On the other, where you have one main roof, and then the porch is essentially its own footprint that's projecting out. So there's a break in the porch.
So for this applicant, we're considering this dormer to be sitting on the porch is not detached, the porch roof line? Am I making sense?
Yes, the form is more like the example on the right, although the dormer on the proposed is matching the other type. If there were 2 subtypes of bungalow there.
Yeah, okay.
Mixing forms from the different types.
Am I allowed to speak? No.
Let me make sure there's no more discussion. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if, and the architects, please speak up, if I'm looking at the side elevation, if it's okay if it's a single, this rule is not violated, if it's a single plane coming down, can he just change his, can he just change his roof pitch? And should we be offering that as an option to the applicant to consider?
Sure. Basically on the right side.
I mean, if that's the way this is the straight, we can change it.
That one would need to be straightened.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I mean, we can change it to a straight roof all the way down. I mean, I guess the issue that I have with that is I think that's less typical of a Nashville-style house. And I mean, I know, and I'm not trying to make a big thing out of this because, I mean, we'll do what we have to do. But, I mean, I know the examples that he put up there. I mean, I can drive down East Nashville streets and I could take 5 pictures of houses that have the dormer lined up on a very pitched roof or forward on the porch just as easily. I mean, there just really isn't that much consistency on these. Now, if it was I think if there was a greater change in the pitch of the roof going from the main gabled roof to the front porch, we maybe be a different thing. But this is a pretty minimal change. You know, it's not as though we're going from a 9 to a 4 or something like that. You know, where it's a true porch roof that extends out. This is a I'm not sure. I'm not looking at the plans, but it's probably going from like a 9 to a 7 pitch or something like that.
I know you could drive around Nashville and you see a lot of them that were developed and built before the guidelines, but we do have guidelines that we have to go with. We set a precedent, and it comes back to haunt us, I mean, many, many times. So we really, really have to be very, very careful, even though you can drive around and see just about everything.
I feel
we are trying to be consistent in every approval that we give, and that's why we're very careful with these kind of things.
If I can make just a commentary, the only thing I struggle with, and again, I'm not a historic builder. I don't go into these neighborhoods actively trying to do this all the time. The thing I struggle with is that you don't want me to make a replica house, but yet you want me to make a replica house. You want me to follow the guidelines of all the, make it look like the other houses, but you don't really want one that's a historic replica, right?
There are guidelines that we ask you to build within.
So.
And it really is case by case, as Sean brought up earlier. People they bought plans back in the day, and there was a lot of very similar houses. But anyway, I thank you very much. But thank you, Bev. The only thing the dormer's been one thing we have kind of kept. So but we could ask, they could work with staff. Maybe there's something they can do more with their roof that would work with it. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. I feel like we've always had that for all dormers.
But right now, what we have before us is what we have before us. That's it.
I'm just saying I don't agree with allowing this dormer. I'd say we.
Well, no, I'm just saying this is the proposal.
Yeah.
And this is what we'd be voting on.
Right.
Okay.
Motion or more discussion?
I'll make a motion, then we can have a discussion, is that I'll adopt staff recommendation with the addition that the dormer be set back 2 feet over the front porch, or the line of the roof change such that the dormer can line up with the front of the house. Okay, that would be my motion. Now, nobody wants to second that. Okay, my question is, can we do that in the motion? Okay, all right. Do you really want to say it? Okay.
You did.
All right.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Motion carries. All right. Any more business for real this time? Okay. Meeting adjourned. And I will not...